tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Rob Dalton had built his life the same way he'd built his construction empire, with precision, patience, and an iron will that never bent. At 45, he commanded respect from competitors and loyalty from employees through a simple philosophy. Those who stood by him prospered, and those who crossed him learned why that was a mistake. The Dalton Construction headquarters occupied an entire city block, but Rob still remembered hammering nails as a 17-year-old dropout whose father had abandoned the family. He'd clawed his way from apprentice to foreman to contractor, eventually buying out his former boss and transforming a failing company into a multi-million-dollar operation. His marriage to Jennifer had been different, a rare moment when he'd let his guard down. She'd been 24, working as a dental hygienist, with honey blonde hair and a laugh that seemed genuine in a world full of pretense. Rob had been 30, already successful enough to provide the comfortable life she'd grown up without. "You saved me," Jennifer had whispered on their wedding night, tears glistening as she traced the scars on his knuckles from years of manual labor. 15 years later, those same hands signed million-dollar contracts and employed over 300 people. Their son Tyler, now 14, showed promise on the wrestling team, inheriting his father's determination if not his ruthless edge. Their daughter, Emma, 11, reminded Rob of Jennifer before life had hardened both of them. The family lived in a custom-built mansion on 12 acres outside the city, complete with a basement that Rob had designed as his private sanctuary, a workshop, gym, and office where he planned his business conquests. Jennifer rarely ventured down there, claiming the concrete walls felt cold and prison-like. Rob had always prided himself on reading people, but lately, Jennifer had become unreadable. She'd started working out obsessively, buying expensive clothes, and taking mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. When he questioned her, she'd laughed it off as finally taking care of myself. The first real crack in his suspicion had come 3 weeks ago when Tyler had asked, "Dad, why does Mom get so many deliveries when you're at work?" "What kind of deliveries?" "Flowers, mostly. But she always throws them away before you get home." Rob had filed that information away, the way he cataloged every detail about potential business threats. But this was his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he'd built this empire to protect and provide for. That Tuesday evening, as he reviewed blueprints for a new shopping center, Jennifer announced she'd be out with the girls again, the third time that week. "Which girls?" Rob asked without looking up from his papers. "You don't know them. College friends visiting from Denver." Rob's pen stopped moving. Jennifer had attended community college locally and maintained exactly 0 friendships from that time. She'd never mentioned anyone from Denver. "Have fun," he said simply, watching her reflection in the window as she left. She was wearing a dress he'd never seen before, and her perfume was different, heavier, more expensive. Rob had survived in construction by trusting his instincts, and every instinct screamed that his foundation was cracking. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Surface. The private investigator's office occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building Rob had renovated 5 years earlier. Charlie Morrison owed his lease renewal to Rob's generosity during the recession, a debt the former police detective seemed eager to repay. "I don't like doing this to friends," Charlie said, sliding a manila envelope across his desk. "But you need to see what you're dealing with." The photographs made Rob's jaw clench. Jennifer entering a downtown hotel. Jennifer in a restaurant, leaning across a table to kiss a man Rob recognized immediately. Derek Hoffman, the city planning commissioner who'd fast-tracked several of Rob's permit applications over the years. "How long?" Rob's voice remained steady, a skill learned from years of hiding weakness from competitors. "Best I can tell, about 8 months. Started around the time your company bid on the Riverside project." Rob studied Derek's face in the photos, all boyish charm and politician smile, 15 years younger than Rob and soft in all the places Rob was hardened by decades of physical labor. "There's more," Charlie continued. "They're not just meeting at hotels. She's been bringing him to your house. Your neighbors noticed his car there at least 6 times when you were out of town on business." The betrayal burned deeper than Rob had expected. Not just the adultery, but the calculated nature of it. Jennifer had been planning this, using his own success against him, leveraging his trust and his absences. The basement, Rob said quietly. What? She brought him to our basement. My workshop. The implications hit him like a physical blow. His sanctuary, the place where he'd built models with Tyler and helped Emma with science projects, defiled by his wife and a man he'd actually helped succeed. Charlie shifted uncomfortably. Rob, I've seen a lot of ugly divorces. Don't do anything that'll hurt your kids or put you in legal trouble. Rob stood, pocketing the envelope. I built this city, Charlie. Half the judges, most of the city council, and all the major contractors owe me favors. Derek Hoffman owes his career to my recommendations. What are you planning? Rob's smile held no warmth. I'm going to remind them both that some foundations, once cracked, can't be repaired. That night, Rob installed motion-activated cameras throughout his basement, hidden within the industrial lighting and ventilation systems he designed. If Jennifer wanted to use his sanctuary for her betrayal, he'd ensure every moment was documented. 3 days later, his phone buzzed with a security alert. The basement cameras had detected movement. Rob was 2 hours away, touring a construction site, but the live feed on his phone showed everything he needed to see. Jennifer and Derek on the leather couch where Rob had taught his children to tie their shoes, where he'd planned business strategies that employed hundreds of families. But this time, Rob didn't just watch. He activated a system he'd installed years ago for security purposes, one that could seal the basement exits remotely. The electronic locks engaged with a soft click that the camera's microphones barely picked up. Rob left the construction site immediately, driving home with the patience of a predator who knows his prey can't escape. Chapter 3. The Call. The basement had been designed as a fortress with reinforced steel doors and a ventilation system that could be controlled from Rob's phone. As he drove home, he tested each system methodically. The locks held. The lights dimmed to emergency power. The temperature began dropping as the climate control responded to his commands. By the time Rob arrived home, Derek's BMW sat in the driveway like a confession. Through his phone, he watched them realize the doors wouldn't open, saw Derek's confident facade crack as he rattled the handles and pressed the emergency buttons that Rob had quietly disabled months ago. Rob entered through the kitchen, where Tyler was doing homework at the counter. Dad? Mom's car is here, but I haven't seen her. She's in the basement with a friend. They're having an important conversation. From upstairs, Rob could hear Derek's voice growing louder, more desperate, as he called for help through the soundproofed walls. Rob had built this basement to contain power tools and construction noise. It would contain Derek's panic equally well. Rob's phone showed Jennifer trying to calm Derek, but her own composure was fracturing. They'd been trapped for 40 minutes, and the temperature had dropped to an uncomfortable 55 degrees. Tyler, Rob said calmly, take Emma to your grandmother's house. Tell her I'll pick you up tomorrow. Is everything okay? Rob's smile felt foreign on his face. Everything's perfect. After the children left, Rob descended to the basement's main door and knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the steel. Rob! Jennifer's voice was muffled but audible. The door's stuck. We can't get out. I know, Rob replied. That's the point. The silence that followed was profound. Then Derek's voice, trying to sound authoritative. Rob, this is a misunderstanding. If you'll just open the door, we can explain. Explain what? How you've been fucking my wife in my house for 8 months. How you used the influence I gave you to destroy my marriage. Rob activated the intercom system he'd installed for communicating with workers during loud projects. Their voices came through crystal clear now. Rob, please. Jennifer's voice cracked. I can explain everything. No need. I have 8 months of bank records showing your new wardrobe, restaurant charges at places we've never been together, and hotel receipts. Charlie Morrison is very thorough. Derek tried a different approach. Look, this doesn't have to ruin anyone's career. We can work something out. You're right, Rob interrupted. It doesn't have to ruin your career. It's going to end it completely. Rob pulled out his phone and made the first call to the mayor's office, where his donation history ensured immediate access. Tom, it's Rob Dalton. I need to discuss some irregularities in Derek Hoffman's permit approvals. Yes, I have documentation. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? The second call went to the president of Derek's bank, where Rob's construction loans represented their largest commercial account. Paul, I've discovered some concerning conflicts of interest involving Derek Hoffman's city position and his personal finances. I think you should know before it becomes public. Through the intercom, Rob could hear Derek pleading with Jennifer, their affair's romance evaporating under pressure. The third call was to his attorney, setting up emergency divorce proceedings that would protect his assets and ensure custody of his children. Jennifer, Rob finally said into the intercom, I want you to understand something. I built this house for our family. I designed this basement as my sanctuary. You turned it into the scene of your betrayal. So now it's where that betrayal ends. What do you mean? Derek's voice had risen to near hysteria. Rob checked his watch. It's 7 p.m. The temperature down there will hit freezing around midnight. The oxygen will last until dawn if you don't panic too much. You can't be serious, Jennifer whispered. I'm dead serious, but I'm not unreasonable. You have until midnight to decide who's more important to you, Derek or our children, because only one of you is leaving this basement alive. The screaming that followed confirmed Rob's suspicion that Derek wasn't quite the man Jennifer thought she'd fallen in love with. Rob climbed the stairs, leaving his wife and her lover to contemplate the consequences of breaking Robert Dalton's trust. Outside, he could see his neighbors' houses, families settling in for quiet evenings, unaware that the foundation of the Dalton household was finally being demolished and rebuilt to Rob's exact specifications. Chapter 4. The game begins. At 9 p.m., Rob received an unexpected visitor. Tyler stood on the front porch, having somehow convinced his grandmother to drive him back. Dad, there's something weird going on. Emma's crying and won't tell Grandma why. And Mom's phone keeps going to voicemail. Rob's calculation shifted instantly. His children's well-being superseded even his revenge, a hierarchy Derek and Jennifer had foolishly ignored when they chose his home as their playground. Come inside, son. We need to talk. Rob led Tyler to the living room, away from the basement door. Through his phone's monitoring app, he could see Derek pacing frantically while Jennifer sat curled in a corner, finally understanding the depth of her mistake. Your mother made some bad choices, Rob began carefully. She's been lying to us about where she goes, and she's been bringing someone to our house who doesn't belong here. Tyler's face darkened with premature understanding. The guy with the BMW? I saw him here last week when you were in Portland. Rob felt a flash of pride at his son's observational skills, followed by anger that Jennifer had exposed their children to her deception. That's right. His name is Derek Hoffman. He works for the city, and he's been taking advantage of your mother's confusion. Are you getting divorced? The direct question deserved an honest answer. Yes. Your mother broke promises that can't be fixed, but you and Emma will always be my priority. Tyler nodded with the gravity of someone forced to mature too quickly. What happens now? Rob checked his phone. The basement temperature had dropped to 48 degrees. Derek was trying to break down the door with a wrench from Rob's tool cabinet, achieving nothing but exhaustion against reinforced steel. Now, your mother and Derek learn about consequences. But first, you're going to call Emma and tell her everything will be okay. Then you're going back to Grandma's house. I want to stay with you. Rob's heart ached at the loyalty, but his son couldn't witness what came next. I know you do, but tonight, I need to finish something that started before you were born, when I decided what kind of man I was going to be. At 10 p.m., Rob made his final offer through the intercom. Jennifer, I'm giving you 30 minutes to make a choice. You can try to save Derek, or you can think about Tyler and Emma's future. But understand this. Whoever I pull out of that basement alive will be the only one who survives what's coming next. Derek's voice exploded through the speaker. You're insane. When this gets out, you'll be in prison for kidnapping for attempted murder. No, Rob interrupted calmly. When this gets out, I'll be a grieving widower whose wife and her lover died in a tragic accident during their secret affair. My basement security system will show how they went down there together and got trapped when the old electronic locks malfunctioned during a power surge. Rob flipped the main electrical breaker, plunging the house into darkness before switching to backup power that excluded the basement. To any investigation, it would look like a system failure had caused the locks to engage automatically. The security cameras will show me arriving home to find their bodies, calling 911 immediately and desperately trying to break down the door. Very tragic. Very unfortunate. Jennifer's voice came through broken and desperate. Rob, please. I know I hurt you, but Tyler and Emma need their mother. Tyler and Emma need a mother who respects their family enough not to destroy it. You stopped being that person 8 months ago. Rob had spent years studying his wife, learning her patterns and weaknesses the same way he analyzed business competitors. Jennifer was selfish, but not evil, vain, but not heartless. Derek represented everything she thought she wanted: youth, excitement, freedom from responsibility. But when faced with actual consequences, Rob knew which choice she'd make. Derek, meanwhile, was a political creature who'd built his career on charm and connections rather than substance. Under pressure, his true nature was emerging: cowardly, entitled, and willing to sacrifice anyone for his own survival. At 10:25 p.m., Jennifer's voice came through the intercom with the flat tone of surrender. Rob, I choose my children. I choose Tyler and Emma. Derek's screaming protest was cut short by the sound of Jennifer hitting him with something heavy, probably the metal toolbox Rob kept by his workbench. Rob smiled. His wife was many things, but she'd never been weak. Chapter 5. Reconstruction. Rob waited until Derek's voice stopped coming through the intercom before engaging the basement's emergency release. The steel door opened with a hydraulic whisper, revealing Jennifer standing over Derek's unconscious form, her face streaked with tears and determination. Is he dead? Rob asked clinically. No, but he will be if you want him to be. Rob studied his wife in the emergency lighting, blonde hair disheveled, expensive dress torn, manicured hands bloodied from gripping the toolbox she'd used as a weapon. This was the woman he'd married before comfort and complacency had dulled her survival instincts. I don't want him dead, Rob said finally. Dead men can't suffer properly. Rob descended into his sanctuary, now reclaimed through violence and choice. Derek was breathing but unconscious, a gash across his forehead where Jennifer had struck him. Help me get him upstairs. Together, they carried Derek to the living room, Rob noting how Jennifer moved with purpose now, the affair's romantic delusion replaced by practical necessity. Rob, I need you to know. No explanations. Rob cut her off. Explanations are for people who made mistakes. You made choices. 8 months of calculated choices. Derek groaned back to consciousness as Rob zip-tied his hands behind his back, a skill learned from years of securing construction materials. What happens to him? Jennifer asked. Derek's going to help me send a message about the cost of betraying trust. Rob had spent the last 3 hours making calls, and the trap was already springing shut around Derek's life. By morning, his bank would freeze his accounts pending an investigation into irregularities in city permit approvals. His political allies would distance themselves from the scandal Rob's documentation had already put in motion. But that was just the beginning. Derek's eyes focused on Rob with the desperate clarity of a cornered animal. You can't do this. I have rights. You had rights, Rob corrected. You also had a wife, a career, and a future. All things you gambled away when you decided to fuck my wife in my house. Rob pulled out his phone and showed Derek a photo. Derek's wife Linda at their suburban home, unaware that her husband's affair was about to destroy everything she'd built her life around. Linda's going to receive some interesting photographs tomorrow, along with bank records showing how you've been spending city money on hotel rooms and gifts for your mistress. Derek's face went white. Linda doesn't deserve this. Neither did my children, Rob replied. But you made your choice when you involved our families in your selfishness. Jennifer watched this exchange with growing understanding. She thought her affair was about love and excitement, but Rob was showing her the brutal mathematics of betrayal, how every action created consequences that spread like cracks through multiple foundations. What do you want from me? Derek whispered. Rob's smile was sharp as construction steel. I want you to disappear. Tonight. Forever. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever contact my wife or approach my children, I'll finish what Jennifer started in that basement. And go where? Do what? You're destroying my entire life. I'm giving you the chance to start over somewhere else, which is more mercy than you showed my family. Take it. Rob cut Derek's zip ties and watched him stumble toward the door. His political confidence shattered along with his skull. Derek would leave town, Rob knew. Men like him always ran when confronted with real consequences. As Derek's BMW disappeared down the driveway, Jennifer finally spoke. What happens to us? Rob looked at his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who'd shared his bed for 15 years and then shared his sanctuary with another man. We rebuild, he said simply, but on my terms this time. Chapter 6, New Foundations. The divorce papers Jennifer signed were more comprehensive than a construction contract and equally unforgiving. Rob's attorney had crafted them during the long night, ensuring that Jennifer's affair would cost her everything except minimal custody rights. Rights she'd retain only as long as she adhered to Rob's conditions. Supervised visits only for the first year, Rob explained as Jennifer read through the settlement. All contact with Tyler and Emma monitored. No overnight stays until they're 18 and can choose for themselves. Jennifer's hand trembled as she turned the pages. The financial terms were devastating but not vindictive. She'd receive enough support to live modestly, but the mansion, the investments, and the children would remain with Rob. This is the best deal you're going to get, Rob continued, because it's based on me believing you chose our children over Derek. If I find out you've contacted him, if I discover you're planning to continue this relationship anywhere, I'm not. Jennifer interrupted quickly. Rob, I swear whatever we had is over. Rob studied her face with the same intensity he brought to reading architectural blueprints. The woman sitting across from him was hollow-eyed and diminished. Her suburban princess fantasy collapsed under the weight of real consequences. Good. Because Derek's political career ended this morning when the mayor received my documentation of his permit irregularities. His wife filed for divorce after receiving those photographs Charlie took. His bank froze his accounts, and I made sure word reached his new girlfriend's husband. Apparently Derek's been quite busy. Jennifer's eyes widened. How many others? 3 that we found. Turns out your city commissioner has a pattern of using his position to seduce married women with construction permits or zoning appeals. You weren't special, Jennifer. You were just convenient. The devastation in Jennifer's expression might have moved Rob once, but that capacity for mercy had been cauterized in the basement when she'd chosen their children over her lover. Tyler and Emma returned from their grandmother's house that afternoon to find their mother packing suitcases and their father making dinner with unusual attention to detail. Are you leaving, Mom? Emma asked with 11-year-old directness. Jennifer knelt to her daughter's eye level. For a while, sweetheart. Mommy made some mistakes that hurt Daddy and our family. I need to go away and think about how to fix them. Tyler, more perceptive at 14, watched his father's reaction. Rob's face remained impassive, but Tyler caught the slight nod. Approval for Jennifer's honesty, rare enough to be noteworthy. Will you visit us? Emma's voice was small. Every weekend, Jennifer promised, glancing at Rob for confirmation. He nodded again. The custody arrangement would allow that much. After Jennifer left for her new apartment across town, Rob sat with his children at the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals as a family. Is this our fault? Emma asked. Did we do something wrong? Rob's chest tightened. His daughter's guilt was the one consequence he hadn't calculated, the crack in his own foundation he hadn't anticipated. No, baby girl. This is about choices adults made. Your mother chose to break promises she made to me, and I chose not to accept that. Those were our decisions, not yours. Tyler, wrestling with his own understanding, asked, Dad, are you going to be okay? Rob looked at his son, almost as tall as Rob now, with the same stubborn jaw and direct gaze that had carried Rob through decades of challenges. I'm going to be better than okay. We're going to be better than okay. Because we're going to rebuild our family the right way this time, with trust, honesty, and respect for each other. That night, after the children were asleep, Rob returned to his basement sanctuary. The leather couch where Jennifer and Derek had betrayed his trust sat empty, but it no longer felt contaminated. It was just furniture now, in a space that belonged to him and his children. Rob opened his phone and reviewed the construction plans for a new project, a community center that would employ dozens of workers and serve hundreds of families. Building had always been his answer to destruction, creation his response to loss. He'd torn down a marriage, exposed a corrupt official, and restructured his family according to his specifications. The foundation was solid now, built on consequences rather than compromises. Rob Dalton had always been a man who built things to last. Now he was going to build a future where betrayal carried a price too high for anyone to pay. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Rob's reconstruction was nearly complete. Tyler had grown 3 inches and joined the varsity wrestling team, channeling his anger into the sport his father understood. Emma had stopped asking when Mommy was coming home permanently and started helping Rob plan their weekend activities. Jennifer's supervised visits had become routine, Saturday afternoons at neutral locations, conversations that stayed carefully surface level, a relationship rebuilt around the children's needs rather than adult complications. But Derek Hoffman had made a critical error. Instead of disappearing as Rob had ordered, he'd remained in the city, taking a job with a competing construction firm and rebuilding his life on the assumption that Rob's revenge was complete. Charlie Morrison's call came on a Tuesday morning. "Rob, you need to see this." The photographs showed Derek meeting with Vincent Torres, owner of Torres Construction, Rob's primary competitor for city contracts. The images captured handshakes, document exchanges, and what appeared to be very friendly negotiations. "They're planning something," Charlie explained. "Derek's been feeding Torres information about your bid processes, your client relationships, everything he learned during his time with the Planning Commission." Rob studied the photos with the cold analysis that had built his empire. Derek had violated the fundamental rule of defeated enemies. He tried to rebuild by attacking rather than retreating. "There's more," Charlie continued. "Derek's been telling people around town that you kidnapped him, that you threatened his life. He's building a case that you're mentally unstable and dangerous to work with." Rob smiled, recognizing the pattern. Derek was attempting to use Rob's own reputation for ruthlessness against him, turning strength into weakness through clever narrative construction. "Has Torres filed any formal complaints? Gone to the police?" "No." Derek's smart enough to know he can't prove anything, and Torres doesn't want to risk your political connections. "But they're definitely planning to damage your business reputation." Rob made 2 phone calls. The first was to his attorney, requesting documentation of every city contract Derek had influenced during his affair with Jennifer. The second was to Vincent Torres directly. "Vincent, it's Rob Dalton. I think we should meet. I have some information about Derek Hoffman that affects both our businesses." The meeting took place at Rob's office, in the conference room, where he negotiated $100 million projects. Vincent Torres arrived with Derek in tow, clearly expecting some kind of showdown. Rob had prepared differently. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming." "Vincent, I assume Derek has told you about our personal difficulties?" Torres nodded cautiously. "He mentioned some problems with your wife. Did he mention that during his affair with Jennifer, he used his position on the Planning Commission to fast-track my permit applications in exchange for her companionship?" The question hung in the air like construction dust. Derek's face went pale as Rob continued. "Did he explain that every project approval he influenced while sleeping with my wife constitutes corruption of public office? Or that the FBI is very interested in his pattern of trading permits for sexual favors with multiple married women?" Rob slid a folder across the table, not to Derek but to Torres. "Vincent, you've built a respectable business over 20 years. Are you sure you want to associate with someone whose very presence makes every contract he touches legally questionable?" Torres opened the folder, his expression growing darker as he read. Rob had documented everything. Derek's permit approvals, the timeline of his affair with Jennifer, the pattern of corruption that extended far beyond one relationship. "This is all circumstantial," Derek protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it's not. Rob replied calmly. Because Jennifer has agreed to testify about every conversation where you discussed manipulating city processes. Every time you bragged about your influence. Every promise you made to smooth the way for projects in exchange for continued access to my wife. Derek's political instincts finally recognized the trap. Rob hadn't just documented the affair. He created a legal framework that made Derek's very existence a liability to anyone who worked with him. You're bluffing, Derek said desperately. Jennifer would never. Jennifer will do whatever protects her children's future, Rob interrupted. And her children's future depends on their father maintaining his business and reputation. You're not just my enemy, Derek. You're a threat to Tyler and Emma's inheritance. Vincent Torres closed the folder and looked at Derek with the expression of a man cutting loose dead weight. Derek, I think our business relationship is concluded. Derek left the building alone, his brief comeback shattered by the same miscalculation that had cost him everything the first time, underestimating Robert Dalton's capacity for patient, thorough destruction. Chapter 8. The Final Blow. Derek's desperation made him dangerous in ways Rob hadn't anticipated. Cut off from legitimate employment and facing potential federal corruption charges, Derek began stalking Jennifer during her custody visits, appearing at the restaurants and parks where she met with Tyler and Emma. Emma noticed first, pointing out the man who keeps watching us during a Saturday afternoon at the zoo. Tyler, now 15 and protective of his sister, was ready to confront Derek directly. No, Rob said firmly when Tyler suggested action. Derek is trying to provoke us into doing something stupid. We're going to be smarter than that. But Derek's harassment escalated. He followed Jennifer home from her custody visits, left threatening messages on her apartment voicemail, and began spreading rumors that Rob had threatened to kill him. All carefully crafted to build a case for police intervention without admitting his own criminal behavior. The breaking point came when Derek approached Emma directly outside her school, claiming to be a friend of Mommy's who needed to talk to her about her father. Emma, trained by Rob's careful lessons about strangers, ran to the school office instead of listening. But the incident crossed every line Rob had established for protecting his children. That evening, Rob made a different kind of call, not to lawyers or investigators, but to Mickey Torino, a foreman who'd worked for Rob for 15 years and whose loyalty ran deeper than professional obligation. Mickey, remember when that subcontractor tried to steal copper from the Riverside site? Sure. You had me and the boys convince him to find work in another state. I need that kind of convincing again. But this time it's personal. Mickey asked no questions. Men who'd worked construction for decades understood the difference between business disputes and threats to family. The conversation took place in Derek's apartment parking lot at 2 a.m., with Derek awakened by a knock on his door that he was wise enough not to ignore. Mickey and two other foremen, all built like the heavy machinery they operated, delivered Rob's final message with the clarity that only comes from absolute certainty. Mr. Dalton wants you to understand that your next choice is permanent, Mickey explained in the tone he used for safety briefings. You can leave this city tonight and never come back, or you can stay and see what happens when you threaten his children. Derek, understanding that he'd finally pushed beyond the realm of legal consequences into something more primitive and final, made the smart choice. His apartment was empty by dawn, his car gone, his forwarding address non-existent. Rob received confirmation through Charlie Morrison that Derek had withdrawn his savings and disappeared, this time apparently understanding that some men's patience had limits that couldn't be tested twice. Jennifer called that afternoon, her voice shaky with relief. He's gone. Derek's gone. I know. Rob, what did you do? I protected our children, Rob replied simply. Something I should have done more thoroughly the first time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything that had been destroyed and rebuilt. Thank you, Jennifer finally whispered. Rob felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Derek's removal was simply maintenance, like repairing a foundation crack before it could spread. This ends it, Jennifer. Derek, the affair, the consequences, all of it. We move forward now, for Tyler and Emma. I understand. Rob believed she did. His wife had learned the true cost of betrayal, not just to herself, but to everyone connected to her choices. She'd pay that price for the rest of her life, in limited custody and supervised visits, and the knowledge that her children's father was a man who never forgot and never forgave completely. But she'd also learned that Robert Dalton protected what belonged to him with a precision and commitment that few people could match or challenge. Chapter 9. Solid Ground. 2 years after Derek's disappearance, the Dalton family had found its new equilibrium. Tyler, now 17 and captain of the wrestling team, had grown into a young man who understood that strength came with responsibility. Emma, 13 and showing signs of her father's analytical mind, excelled in math and science while maintaining the emotional intelligence her mother had possessed before corruption set in. Jennifer's custody visits had evolved from supervised encounters to genuine relationships with her children, though she lived in permanent exile from the family she'd helped destroy. She worked as a dental hygienist again, supporting herself modestly while rebuilding trust one careful weekend at a time. Rob had expanded Dalton Construction into 3 states, employing over 800 people and earning recognition as a leader in sustainable building practices. The community center he'd built after the divorce served as headquarters for youth programs that kept kids like Tyler and Emma engaged in positive activities. The basement that had once been violated by betrayal now housed Tyler's weight training equipment and Emma's science experiments. Rob had never spoken to his children about what had happened in that space during the affair, but Tyler seemed to understand why his father occasionally stared at the walls with the expression of a man remembering battles fought and won. Derek Hoffman's name had faded from city memory, his brief political career reduced to a cautionary tale about corruption and the consequences of overreaching. Rob occasionally wondered if Derek had managed to rebuild somewhere else, but the wondering was academic. Derek was no longer his problem. The mail arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Rob recognized Jennifer's handwriting immediately. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with 3 words, "I am sorry." Rob studied the note, remembering the woman who'd written it. Young, beautiful, laughing in the kitchen of their first apartment while he planned the empire that would eventually protect and provide for their children. He filed the letter in his desk drawer, not because forgiveness was possible, but because some communications required acknowledgement even when they changed nothing. Tyler found him there an hour later, reviewing blueprints for a new housing development that would employ dozens of families. "Dad, I got accepted to state engineering program." Rob looked up at his son, tall, confident, carrying himself with the quiet strength that came from watching his father rebuild their world through will and precision. "Full scholarship, academic, and wrestling. Coach says I've got potential for nationals if I keep working." Rob nodded, pride mixing with satisfaction. Tyler would build his own empire someday, but he'd do it with the foundation Rob had provided. The understanding that trust was earned, betrayal was punished, and family was protected at any cost. What about Emma's science fair project? First place, regional competition. She's going to states with that water purification system you helped her design. Rob smiled, thinking of his daughter's brilliance applied to solving real problems rather than creating them. Emma would change the world through innovation rather than construction, but she'd carry the same principles: precision, patience, and the knowledge that some people could be trusted and others could only be contained. That evening, as Rob tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question he'd been expecting for months. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come home for good?" Rob considered his answer carefully, weighing honesty against hope. "No, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean our family is broken. It just means we rebuilt it stronger." Emma nodded with the acceptance of a child who'd learned that strength sometimes required difficult choices. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl." Rob turned off her bedroom light and walked to his study, where the blueprints for tomorrow's projects waited on his desk. Through the window, he could see the lights of the city he'd helped build, the neighborhoods where his employees lived, the schools and hospitals and community centers that bore his company's signature. Robert Dalton had learned long ago that some foundations, once cracked, could never be repaired, only demolished and rebuilt according to better specifications. He'd applied that knowledge to his marriage, his business, and his family with the same precision he brought to construction projects. The results were solid, functional, and built to last. Outside, the city hummed with the quiet activity of people living their lives on foundations they trusted to hold. Rob had made sure those foundations were worthy of that trust, just as he'd made sure his children understood the difference between building and destroying, between strength and weakness, between loyalty and betrayal. Derek Hoffman was gone. Jennifer lived with the consequences of her choices. Tyler and Emma were growing into adults who understood the value of character and the cost of its absence. Robert Dalton's work was complete, his foundation secure, his legacy established in steel and stone, and the uncompromising principles that had carried him from a 17-year-old dropout to a man who owned half a city and commanded respect from the other half. Some men built buildings. Rob Dalton had built something more lasting, a definition of consequences that would echo through every relationship his children formed, every choice they made, every foundation they laid for their own futures. In a world full of compromise and second chances, Robert Dalton had created something rare, absolute accountability. And in doing so, he'd ensured that the Dalton name would be associated with strength, precision, and the unforgiving mathematics of trust for generations to come. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.